I love bunnies. Our SOS course. I'm really grateful, as I always say, to be on this course with you. Here is Chapter 8, Secret of the Shadow, Finding Your Unique Specialty. Here we go. Hidden within our stories is a unique specialty that is unlike that of anybody else. This is the priceless reward for all that we have lived, our return to wholeness. Our specialty is our unique recipe, the sum total of our life's experiences. Each of our traumas, each of our emotional wounds, as well as our joys and talents, are here to teach us and guide us to the highest expression of ourselves. As soon as we are able to recognize the usefulness of our stories and extract our specialty out of the dramas we have lived, we will stand in awe of the universe and its divine orchestration. We will see, maybe for the first time, how all the pieces of our lives have worked together to give us a contribution that is unmistakably ours. We will then be able to make sense out of the senseless. We will be able to extract wisdom out of our trauma and pain. We will understand why we were blessed with the specific gifts that only we have. With newfound clarity, we'll be able to see how each event of our lives was perfectly orchestrated to unfold our highest possibilities. We will see the stories of our lives in a new light. Suddenly, our parents, our body issues, our fears, our struggles, our wins and our losses, and our talents and our triumphs will make sense. We will stand in the certainty that if we hadn't lived everything we have lived, we would never be able to unveil the wisdom of our divine gift. Claiming your gift. We uncover our specialty. When we can look at our lives, all our shadows, our light, our negative conclusions, and all our experiences, and ask ourselves these questions. Now, why would I have needed that belief or experience? How can this event lead me to discover my unique contribution to the world? What can I now contribute having gone through what I did? What knowledge and insights do I now possess that I never would have developed if I hadn't had that experience? We'll know that we've truly integrated our stories when we can see and use the gifts that they have brought us. When we have extracted our recipe for the drama of our stories, we will be in the presence of our unique contribution. We will be in a position to share our wisdom and with the world, and we will be guided to the best vehicle for that expression. When we extract our specialty, we allow the world to benefit from the book of our lives. This requires us to look at our lives through a particular lens and ask ourselves, if my life so far has been training me to do or be something in particular in the world, what would it be? Most of us are unable to see the specialty that our story has provided for us. Until we make peace with our past and give up blaming others for the condition of our lives, we will remain blind to our unique gifts. But as soon as we embrace both the light and the dark part of ourselves and take responsibility for all of who we are, we will open up to the gifts that are ours to share. Debbie always asks people who are stuck in their stories, if you were to write a book, what would its title be? Here are a few of the award-winning titles of our stories have qualified us to write. How to use your life to suffer, how to torment yourself in 28 days, how to experience negative inner dialogue to the fullest, how to manifest not good enough in every area of your life, how to prove to yourself and to others that you are unlovable, how to push people away so that you'll know you're an unwanted reject. While any of these books might while any of these books might qualify as a good read, we think most of us would prefer a title that expresses our highest selves. Every experience in our lives has provided us with specific knowledge and wisdom. Everything that has happened to us was divinely designed to support us in making our unique contribution to the world. So what is your story's contribution? Now is the time to look at your story in a completely new way and discover the contribution that it holds. Here are a couple examples. If your mother left you early in your life, and 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 your two ex-wives walked out on you, your specialty might be, when women leave, how to stay empowered on your own. If your drama is filled with needing men to take care of you because you have the shadow belief that you can't take care of yourself, your specialty might be teaching women to thrive on their own. If you were abused by your uncle or date raped in college, your specialty might be teaching teenagers self-protection and good boundaries. If you have battled with addiction your entire life and failed, you might be able to share this specialty showing kids the depths and trauma of addiction. See, in order to discover your recipe, your specialty, you must be committed to using everything you have been through to just contribute to somebody else's life. You don't need to be a college professor or an author to contribute your specialty to the world. You teach by example what you are here to contribute. You may pass it on to your children or share it with your best friend on a hike. You might impart your wisdom at the water cooler at work or at your nephew's 12th birthday party. Each of us is given opportunities to contribute all the time. It could be a relative's funeral or when an old high school friend contacts us on the internet. We don't know when or where we'll have an opportunity to deliver our gift to the world. We just need to embrace that we indeed have a gift. Standing in the presence of the special gift that we hold, we will experience a deep peace with our stories and be ready for the giant leap out of our personal dramas and into our divine expression. Outgrowing your story. At some point in your life, at some time in Debbie's life, it became clear to her that her story was getting her nowhere. She was faced with a choice. She could stay inside it, continue doing what she had been doing, hoping things would get better and striving to find a little more joy or happiness, or she could give up all the safety and comfort of the known and embark on an adventure beyond her story. Deep down in her soul, she knew she had a higher calling. She ached for the spontaneity she had of the unknown. She grew sick and tired of the predictability of her own life. She felt as though she was all used up inside her story. Her drama no longer offered her surprises or joy. She always knew what would go right or what would go wrong, what goals she could attain, and what would keep just slightly out of her reach. Finally, the day came when she bottomed out and was no longer willing to live inside her self-created limitations. That day, she began to pray for the courage to no longer know herself, but because the self she knew left her feeling disconnected and empty inside. She prayed for the unveiling of her higher self. It wasn't until it wasn't that she minded the self that she had known, but it was a boring saga. And living out each day was like watching a movie she had seen one too many times. In a way, she was blessed by having so much inner turmoil because it accelerated her desire to transcend her story. While she was going through her divorce, it became clear that it was time to transcend yet another of her stories. That it was once again time to sink or swim. She had just given birth to her first child and had unknowingly stepped right into the motherhood drama, complete with all its joys, triumphs, worries, and fears. Wow, was that a story? She worried about how she could live, how she could survive on her own, and how she could afford to create a life for herself and her son. One day, while she was feeling absolutely suffocated by the limitations of her past, her sister asked her a very powerful question. What would you need to do to be blissfully happy, contribute to the world, take care of your son, and create the life of your dreams? As Debbie contemplated that question, she saw clearly it was time for her to stop being a student and to step into the role of being a teacher. It was time to share the wisdom she had spent years collecting. The one talent she really knew she had was that she could find the gift or the blessing in any negative experience. Her pain had taught her to become a master at reinterpreting her life's experiences and using them to transform her current reality. The pain and trauma of her past had given her a unique specialty to bring light to darkness and using them to transform her current reality. The pain and trauma of her past had given her a unique specialty. I repeated this, sorry. To bring light to darkness and find the blessings in all her events. I guess it bared repeating. As she assessed her skills and her capabilities, she saw that her most valuable possession came from an unlikely source, the pain and struggles of her past. Standing at this crossroads, she saw that she could either use the experiences of her life to contribute to others or allow her past and her limitations to continue to use her. She had to decide which road she would take, and that decision had to be backed up by action. She knew that her purpose was to bring light to the darkness, to bring healing where there was once pain. And when she meditated on how to fulfill this purpose, the message got clear. She needed to write. She made the commitment to write that every day. The process of writing every day, whether she felt like it or not, supported her in living outside her story. Although her commitment was strong, she knew she would need a support structure if she was to continue to live the highest expression of herself. She had to take a stand and make a loud declaration. This is who I am. She told everyone she met that she was writing about embracing the shadow. Not only did she tell friends and family, she went public, sharing her new self with publishers, agents, and spiritual teachers. She had to put herself on the line so there would be immediate consequences if she slipped back into her story. During this period of unveiling her highest self, she attracted a whole new group of friends and associates who had never heard her poor me drama. They knew only the story of who she wanted to be. And as she made this shift within herself, she found that the world responded to her differently. Writing a book was something she had always wanted to do, but had always lived with that well outside the boundaries of her story. But that this was clearly her next step. It was clear to her that she had only two choices. She would continue traveling down her repetitive road to nowhere, collecting more war stories, more scars, and more resignation, or she could make a new choice, go down a different path, and arrive at a place she had never been before. She knew that to accomplish her goal, she would need to stay present with her discomfort and her fear of the unknown rather than the retreat to the false safety of unfamiliar ground. She made the conscious choice to stop listening to her shadow box, which screamed, you'll never finish what you start. You're not smart enough to write a book, and nobody will listen to what you have to say anyway. Instead, she made choices that were outside the realm of anything she'd done before. One day at a time, she took actions that were consistent with the person she desired to be rather than the person she had been. After a few months of consciously choosing to live outside her story, she could tell immediately when she had slipped back in. She could feel that familiar sense of resignation coming over her like a dark cloud, carrying with it all the old feelings of self-doubt, uncertainty, and fear. She knew she had stepped back into the limitations of her drama when she again started listening to that small, scared part of her that begged her to stop striving for anything other than the life she knew. It pleaded her to stay small and stay safe. When she had stepped back inside her story, she felt insignificant, bored, and lazy. Taking the leap outside her story required her to stop, close her eyes, and acknowledge herself. Oh, here I am, back inside my story. And now, standing outside her story, she felt strong and bold, boundless and indestructible. But stepping out of her past and leading the story she knew so well felt like taking a giant leap off a high cliff. It appeared that the distance she could fall would be deadly. Instead, her old story already felt like a failure. So if she tried something and it didn't work out, no one would notice. But now she had raised the stakes considerably. She had given up her alibis. If she failed at delivering her book, if she didn't show up as who she wanted to be, she would be left in the hopeless and resignation of a life unfulfilled. This thought was so unbearable that it drove her to keep stepping out, taking risks, and moving forward with an intense focus she had never known before. What she found was that the more she wrote about her life experiences in order to contribute to others, the more distance she had from her story. Living true to her purpose gave her access to staying outside her story and ultimately contributing our unique gift and using our specialty was our salvation. Because when we're using all that we know, all that we have been, and all that we are, we're aligned with the vastness of the universe and the highest expression of our souls. Our attention and energy will no longer be on us and our dramas. This was certainly true for Debbie's friend Karen. Karen grew up in a household where she felt verbally abused and unloved by her parents. She couldn't remember a time when she didn't hear a voice in her head that told her she was inadequate and defective. By the time she was attending elementary school, Karen had begun using food to mask her pain, suppress her feelings of inadequacy, and provide her with the security she never felt at home. By the time she was 10, was noticeably overweight, and she remained that way for most of her adult life. Being overweight, of course, further added to her feelings of inadequacy. Feeling fat, undeserving, and stupid, Karen settled for being invisibly and rarely spoke up for herself. Instead, she continued to abuse herself with food, stuffing herself in an attempt to silence the harsh thoughts and painful feelings that were always screaming to get her attention. To some extent, her strategy worked. Karen felt emotionally numb and disconnected from any sense of passion in her life. The message of her story, which she played out over and over again, was that she was fat and worthless, and that her existence didn't matter. Then one day, after her oldest daughter's wedding, Karen and her family excitedly gathered around watching together to watch the wedding video. When Karen watched herself on video for the first time, she was horrified by what she saw. The feelings of inadequacy she so hard tried to suppress now rushed relentlessly to the surface. She actually saw the reflection of her shadow story in living color all over the television screen. As years of unprocessed pain washed over her, Karen closed her eyes and held herself close, remembering all the incidents from her past that had left her feeling inadequate, defective, and unlovable. Later, when they spoke, Debbie encouraged her to journal on a daily basis as a way of healing and releasing the burden of pain she had been carrying around for so long. Along with her daily practice of journaling, Karen began meditating, praying, and getting quiet enough to listen to what was going on inside of her. Several weeks later, when Karen watched her videotape again, she was amazed by what she saw. This time, her excess weight showed up for her not as a source of shame and guilt, but as a suit of armor for her, not as a source of shame and guilt, for as a source of armor that protected her from the world and cushioned her from her own self-loathing. Having embraced the gift of protection that this armor had offered her for years, Karen was now willing to unzip it and venture outside the safety of her self-deprecating story. Holding on to her excess weight allowed Karen to conceal the truth about herself, that she was worthy of all the love the world had to give her. Her physical imperfections and her weight had been her battleground for so long, and now she was committed to leaving the familiar path of self-abuse and stepping into the world of the unknown. Karen's life changed dramatically. After she identified her life story, once an esthetician, she now worked as a life coach and helped other women stop numbing and abusing themselves with food. She taught them to heal their emotions that underlie their weight issues. She coached them to come out of hiding and to find the courage to express their authentic beauty. She passed on to other women the gifts she gave herself: self acceptance, security, and the confidence to be seen. When feelings of unworthiness surface in her, as they do from time to time, Karen blesses and embraces them. Most of all, she blesses her fat, for it was the driving force behind her discovery of her unique contribution and her decision to share her specialty with the world. Standing outside her story, Karen honored her body as a temple and makes choices that support its well being. Taking the step outside our stories is like having a foot in two worlds. As we look down the path of our stories, we know with certainty where it will take us. Even though we may not like the destination, at least we feel confident and comfortable in the knowledge of to expect. But choosing the unfamiliar road and a life outside our stories calls on us to trust that the universe will show us the way and give us what we need. When she met Lindy a few years ago, she was in her early 20s and working as an insurance broker. Her mother and father, both alcoholics, divorced when Lindy was very young and were rarely around to take care of her as her younger brother. As a result, Lindy was left to fend to herself, and although Lindy started working at the age of 14, she barely made enough money to cover the cost of clothes and school supplies. The story, the story had developed out of Lindy's childhood in that life is a struggle and that no one is ever there for her, so she had to take care of herself. On the outside, Lindy appeared confident and competent, projecting the image that was very distinct gift. Lindy's specialty, that she had it all together. But Lindy had a big secret. At night, after a day of selling insurance in her office, Lindy would get in her car and head downstairs, where she worked as a dancer at a topless bar, and as a way of satisfying her seemingly endless hunger for money. Lindy desperately wanted to lead a more spiritual life, yet she had grown used to the money she earned as a dancer and didn't know how she could make it financially without it. Eventually, the fact that she was exploiting her body for money took too big a toll on her self-esteem, and one day she simply couldn't do it anymore. Committed to stepping outside the life she knew, Lindy decided to take the money that she had saved from her dancing and use it to travel to India. She was really hoping that something huge and dramatic would happen while she was there that would launch her out of her story and into her spiritual essence. But instead, she had two subtle but profound experiences that would ultimately change her destiny and give her the courage to step outside her story. While attending a spiritual seminar in Goa, Lindy came across a man who was selling the most exquisite pictures of India. She wanted desperately to have those beautiful souvenirs to take home to show her friends and family and to remind her of her spiritual pilgrimage. But when she found out the price of the photographs, she knew she could not afford them. A little voice told her to wait until the end of the seminar, that the man would probably sell the leftover pictures at a discounted price. But Lindy didn't trust this inner knowing and feared that if she didn't act right then and there, she wouldn't be any left for her. So she dug deep into her pockets, bought the photos, and took them back to her room. On the last day of the seminar, as all of the vendors were packing to leave, Lindy noticed that she had been right. There the man was selling the same photos she had purchased for a third of the price she had paid. She felt a familiar pang of regret as she walked away. Lindy had also set off on her trip with the hope of replacing a bedspread her father had owned. She spent days going in and out of little boutiques, hoping to find just what she was looking for. As her trip came to an end, she figured out what she was looking for simply didn't exist. So against her better judgment, she bought the closest thing that she could find. Then, at the airport in Delhi, while waiting for her plane to walk into a little store and saw hanging in the back corner the very bedspread that she had longed to buy for her father. Unfortunately, by this time Lindy's bags were full and her pockets were empty. Lindy was astonished and amazed to realize that she had trusted the universe and her inner knowing that had had she trusted the universe and her inner knowing, everything she wanted would have been delivered effortlessly to her. Instead of being able to bask in the joy of the divinity of the universe, Lindy became face to face with the shifting limitation, the stifling limitations of her story, which told her she couldn't trust the universe to take care of her needs. As she told Debbie this story, a deeper truth emerged. Lindy uncovered her core shadow belief, which said, I can't trust anyone to take care of my needs. When push came to shove, Lindy always crossed the line of her inner integrity and tried to make something happen, sure that she would never get her needs met in any other way. Lindy had countless examples showing her that if she would just let go, get out of the way, and give up her story, the universe would give her exactly what she needed. It became apparent that Lindy's story and all its drama had given her specific wisdom and a very distinct gift. Lindy's specialty is to teach others to trust in the universe, surrender their wills, and listen to their inner knowing. Now a meditation instructor and yoga instructor, Lindy often tells her students, listen to your heart and take that leap of faith. Living out her story, Lindy had a new mantra. The universe gives me everything I need. Lindy feels blessed to know that God speaks to her through her own inner knowing. Extracting your specialty, the process. In order to find your specialty, you must identify and integrate the significant incidences, both positive and negative, that have led you to become the person you are today. This process requires you to do several things, and there are 3 of them. And here's the first one. Make a list of the significant experiences of your life, including your traumas and victories, loves, losses, successes, and humiliations that you already have, by the way. These are the particular ingredients of your recipe, which once integrated will give you everything you need to find your specialty and make your unique contribution. 2, look for the common theme or themes that each of these events share. It might be that loss is the theme that permeates your life story, or you might discover that your theme is that you have been left out of your family, rejected by your peers, or passed over at work. The theme that your past reveals might be that you are never good enough to get the part in the play, to get into the right school, or to find a loyal mate. 3, ask yourself, if I were going to teach a college class based on the incidents of my past, what would the name of my course be? You want to look for what your life experiences that have made you uniquely qualified to teach or contribute. What do you know and understand about life that most people don't? What have you learned from all your life experiences that could benefit someone else? Debbie's sister Ariel is a great example of someone who is using her story and all its contents to empower herself to contribute to the world. Ariel has mastered the art and skill of making things happen. Debbie had asked her to share with with her some of the significant events and incidents from her past that helped her find and develop her unique specialty. As she looked inside, Ariel found 3 events that stood out most in her mind. The first occurred one day when she was 4 years old and attended temple with her family. As they walked into the temple, Ariel overheard Man, who was at that time the president of the temple, telling another adult that people were talking too much during services. During the services, during the service, all of a sudden, and on a whim, Ariel stood up and began walking up and down the aisles of the temple in her pretty pink dress and black patent leather shoes, shouting at the top of her lungs, Man says to shut up. Suddenly, everybody was staring at Ariel, laughing at the candor of this little 4-year-old. Ariel remembers feeling ashamed and horrified and deciding she never wanted to be seen again. She spent the next 20 years of her life trying hard to be invisible and to stay out of the limelight. The second event occurred when she was 7. Ariel was fascinated by fantasy, fairy tales, and magic. As her little sister, Debbie remembered having seances at their house and people at school calling her the witch's sister because Ariel had long black hair down to her waist, always wore black, and was into exploring other realities. There was something very different about Ariel. Debbie knew it, and everyone who met her could see it. One of the experiences she would never forget happened when she was 7 years old. Ariel woke up in the middle of the night and saw their grandfather Lou sitting at the front of the bed. He said, "I came to say goodbye and to tell you I will always be here with you." Then the image of him vanished. At that very moment, Ariel heard the phone ring, saw lights going on in the house, and heard their mother cry out in pain. A few minutes later, their father came into her room and said, "I came to tell you that Grandpa Lou died." And Ariel replied, "I know, Daddy. He already told me." It was at that moment that Ariel knew there was more to life than one could see. The third event occurred on her first day of college. When Ariel went to sign up for her major in TV production, she was met by the dean of the school for women in broadcasting. He told her that she would be much better off in the school of journalism. As a result of taking the dean's advice, Ariel proceeded to learn the ins and outs of journalism, while at the same time sharpening her writing skills. When Ariel finished school, she decided that the job that would best utilize her skills and talents was to be found not in journalism, but in public relations. And for the next 10 years, Ariel successfully promoted events for artists, entertainers, and corporations. But still, she was left feeling dissatisfied and discontent. Then one day, she woke to the realization that she needed to include her deep spiritual life in her work. All the work she had been doing had been preparing her to practice her very specific and unique specialty and thus make the contribution that was truly important to her life. Today, she is one of the most powerful and influential people in the spiritual world. Not only does she promote the top spiritual leaders of our time, she's an agent and who helps get important messages out into the world and is the author of the Hot Chocolate for the Mystical Soul series. Looking back over these three significant events of Ariel's lives, we see two distinct themes emerge. The first is that it wasn't safe for her to be in the limelight. The subtle message that Ariel received both from the incident at the temple and from being told not to pursue a career in broadcasting was not to speak out but to stay in the background. The other theme is her deep connection with the spiritual world. When Ariel looked at what her life's experiences had made her uniquely qualified to contribute, she saw that she had the skills, the know-how, and the power to take important messages out into the world. And instead of feeling discouraged and victimized by the events of her life, which she could easily have done, she decided to use her past, her pain, and her gifts to make a difference in the world. Each of us has this unique capability. No matter how tragic, tiresome, or satisfying our past, we want to examine our lives and dig out our contribution and our gifts. We have learned things and lived through things others have never experienced. Our experience is what makes us specialists, and the world is in need of what we have to offer. This was true for Joanna, who spent years of her life steeped in a story about what a horrible person she was. When Debbie met Joanna, she was filled with anguish and shame about the fact that she was born and raised in Germany and was part of a culture that had committed horrible atrocities against millions of human Jewish people. Joanna struggled with depression, anger, and fear that ran so deep she could barely tolerate the pain. This story consumed her, every thought. She knew that in order for Joanna to heal and to step outside her story, she would need to find the gift that her pain held. She asked Joanna to tell her what it was like to be born in Germany 15 years after the war. She told her that the early years of her life were peaceful and happy, set among the rolling hills and quaint culture of her small village. But by the time that she was 8 or 9, Joanna began hearing the stories her parents and grandparents told about the war. She learned from what it was like to have bombs falling around you and to have to spend the night hiding in the basement for safety. She imagined the terror of not knowing if her mother and father would ever see their sons again, and her relatives shared their as her relatives shared their painful memories. She was horrified to hear about the fears, suffering, and starvation that permeated the dark time of Germany's history. When she was in the eighth grade, Joanna watched a documentary at school about the war. That was the first time she had really seen or understood the impact of the massacre that had occurred in her country. Tears stung her eyes and deep shame washed over her face as she realized that she was a citizen of a country that had perpetrated horrible violence against the Jewish people. Suddenly, an even worse thought arose within her. If the people of my country could massacre 10 million people in cold blood, what does that make me? Could I be capable of the same horrible crimes that were committed by my own people? In that moment, Joanne experienced the deep shame of her heritage and took it upon herself. Debbie often asked Joanna to take the step and make a list. Oh, Debbie then asked Joanna to take the next step, and make a list of the significant events from her past that still weighed heavily on her heart. These were the incidents and events from her past that still caused her embarrassment, anger, or shame. And what did she make those incidents mean about herself? And here's the list that she made. She was told as a child that the people of Germany didn't think for themselves, but just followed Hitler at the expense of millions of lives. She decided she would never be a part of any organization, fearing that she would lose her ability to think for herself. Many times during her life told her, "You're so nice, you're nothing like those Nazis." She decided that if she were outspoken and powerful, she might be thought of as an angry German. So she squashed her power and leadership skills and tried to always be nice and demure. And after moving to the United States and experiencing firsthand the animosity that some Americans feel towards Germans, she distanced herself from her German friends and went 12 years without speaking to any of them. When she visited France, her traveling companion warned her, "The French hate Germans, so tell them you're Swiss or Austrian." She decided it wasn't okay to be herself and began taking on different personas in an attempt to fit in. When she was young, her mother told her that she used to play with some Jewish kids who lived down the street from her. She said that when the war broke out, one day they just disappeared. She was horrified. The knowledge of this incident made her feel uncomfortable around Jewish people. When she first moved to the United States, she went to a party thrown by an employer who happened to be Jewish. And as a party game, they put the name of a famous person on the back of everyone who walked in. There, each guest had to question the others in order to figure out whose name was on their back. Being overly conscious of her heritage, she prayed that they hadn't put the name of a Nazi on her back. But to her horror, the name they had given her was Adolf Hitler. When she was young, she walked into a cafe in her small town in Germany, and a friend of her grandfather's was sitting at a table, boasting about his loyalty to the Nazi party, saying, "I will wear my brown shirt." She felt sick with shame and humiliation and horrified that she was one of them. After seeing a documentary about the war, she tried so she tried to stamp out anything within herself that could possibly be seen as dark or evil. She strove to never do anything bad to anyone, hoping that this would guarantee that nothing bad would happen to herself. She became rigid and controlling, and as a result, she rarely experienced any joy. Having seen the devastation that anger breeds, she never allowed herself to get angry or even maintain healthy boundaries. She thought she had to be nice to everyone, even if they were abusive to her. It was obvious that the events of Joanna's life had given her a very specific recipe. The next stop was for Joanna to find their gifts. So Debbie asked her to make a list of everything she now had and knows as a result of the upbringing in Germany. Here is a list of the skills and abilities that Joanna now possesses that she wouldn't have if she hadn't had these experiences when she did. Growing up in Germany after the war gave my life and my passion for history. I became an avid reader, trying to learn everything I could about the Holocaust. I became very interested in self-help and human potential. I turned to psychology in an attempt to understand how a madman could inspire an entire country to commit unthinkable crimes. Because I hated my heritage, I became good at making new friends and learning about new cultures. I always had a strong interest in any human endeavor. I spent the majority of my teenager years protesting against violence and supporting peaceful outcomes. Because I was horrified by the violence perpetrated against the Jews, I made a commitment early on that my life would be about love, service, and healing. I developed a strong interest in Judaism and studied the Kabbalah. I, I am driven to look for what people have in common rather than what separates them. She was good at finding ways to peacefully resolve conflicts, whether between her and her ex-husband or between her and her kids, because she didn't want anyone to get hurt. She got out of her own way to create win-win solutions. She had learned to be very adaptive and could explain things in many different ways to a divergent group of people. She learned that as long as she could keep quiet about the pain of her past, she would never heal her issues or move forward. She was committed to bringing resolution to the ancestors of the victims as well as the perpetrators of the Holocaust. It was in a unique position to help heal the issue on a global level. Joanna was able to see the many gifts of the painful experiences she had lived. Yet she still wasn't able or sure how to use her specialty to contribute to others. Then, the year before, Joanna met Rosemary, who is very active in the Jewish community, and the two became fast friends. One day they began talking about the wounds that still existed between the Germans and the Jews. Joanna shared with Rosemary the person she had was felt the shared with Rosemary the pain she had felt about being German, pain she had carried with her all her life. She told Rosemary that many of her German friends were still living inside the shame of the atrocity that occurred more than 40 years ago. Rosemary was touched by Joanna's honesty and shared with her that most of her Jewish people she knew had never even considered how the atrocity had affected the Germans who did not participate in those crimes. After hearing Joanna's point of view, Rosemary could see how this incident had victimized the Germans as well as the Jews. Joanna and Rosemary then came up with the brilliant idea of making a documentary about the effect of the Holocaust had on generations of both Jews and the Germans that followed. Rosemary approached an award-winning documentary filmmaker she had met recently in California who agreed to produce the film. Excited, feeling in their hearts how important this message on its terms of healing the world need in as it in terms of healing the world's pain. Now that Joanna is working for a higher purpose, she no longer feels shame about her heritage or of any of the incidents that she had in her past. For the first time, she could truly understood the deeper purpose of her pain and inner turmoil that she had suffered all those years. In fact, she blesses her pain, forgave her the wisdom she needed to make a difference in the world in just the way that she needed to. Joanna cried as she told Debbie that all her life she had been asking herself, "What am I here for?" And now she knew. Being a part of something greater than herself gave Joanna the peace that she had always longed for. She takes care of herself now, from what she eats to how she speaks to herself, because she knows that she is the bearer of a precious gift that is intended to bring healing to the world. Joanna's work paid off. She has found the specialty that lay hidden within her painful life story. Her new commitment is to be a catalyst for the healing between Germans and the Jews. Joanna shared with Debbie exactly what had not been for her that it had not been for her willingness to work through her shame and process the lumps in her batter, she would never have had the courage to even initiate a conversation with a Jewish person. Our specialties are often birthed out of our pain. They are one of the unique gifts that we have to contribute. There is no right specialty, and no two are the same. Our specialty is what enables us to use our stories instead of having our stories use us. It is our unique way to contribute to the world. We know that we make a difference, and that our trials and our tribulations have not been in vain. The process of finding our specialty causes us to reinterpret our life's events, to assign new meanings that will lift us up and prop us up outside of the limitations of our stories. We still have a choice. We all have a choice. We can choose to mix the recipe we were given into a purposeful masterpiece that will feed our souls and nourish those around us, or we can allow our precious recipes to remain uncooked. Unconcealing your unique specialty is the most vital step you can take in transforming your life and living outside your story. Using your specialty will allow you to stand tall and feel empowered and proud about yourself and your life. And so it is.